Oh, hello, everybody. Very warm welcome to you. Welcome to Threads of Healing, Voices of Breathwork-Africa. I am Dr. Ela Manga, and I am of Asian origin. I have short hair, salt and pepper, and my skin is the color of an autumn leaf, and I am of medium stature, I would say. So I'm very happy to welcome you all today. I am the founder of Breathwork-Africa, and this series, the Threads of Healing series, is a gathering. It's a circle of breath and story where we meet practitioners from the Breathwork-Africa community who are really shaping the field of breathwork in unique and beautiful ways. So our intention is simple, just to learn from one another, to celebrate our diversity, to build bridges of understanding, and to offer something of real value that is freely accessible to all who find their way here. So today I feel deeply honored and very happy to welcome Adriana Jamisse. Adriana is a Mozambican artist and facilitator, and she's also a researcher who's passionate about diversity and accessibility and the transformative knowledge of the body. Adriana has a master's in performance from the University of Cape Town, and her work weaves movement and voice, memory, and somatic healing modalities. Rooted in a commitment to social and disability justice, Adriana creates spaces that invite deeper connection to ourselves, each other, and the world we imagine together. Now, Adriana is also a certified breathwork practitioner with Breathwork-Africa. And her work really holds both science and soul, and a deep sensitivity and respect for the ways each of us experiences the world through our own unique rhythm and texture. So, Adriana, welcome. It is such a joy to have you here.
Hi, Ela. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am Adriana. I am biracial. I have dreadlocks that are braided back. I'm wearing a black t-shirt that says it's fine, but with a very disheveled looking creature on it. I'm wearing earrings of a girl on an afro with an afro, and I'm sitting on my couch. Yeah.
Thank you, Adriana. Audiences that are here today, some people might be surprised at the way that we have introduced ourselves. Can you tell us a little bit more about why we have introduced ourselves in this way?
Oh, this is something that I've learned from being in some spaces that are quite accommodating to disabled people. So it helps people with visual impairments or low vision to get a sense of the people who are speaking. It's also very useful if you're doing podcast and people are listening only without seeing. It's quite useful
Oh,
for us. So it's quite accessible and interesting for all of us, really. Yeah.
wow, thank you for that, Adriana. I'm so interested in how breathwork became a part of your life. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do and your somatic work, your work with performance, your work with the body, and your relationship with breath, both in relation to yourself and in relation to the work you do.
Okay. So I am quite interested in the body and the power of the body. I have a background in dance training. performance. I have some theater background, but I also have some yoga. I teach yoga. I used to teach a lot in Maputo. Some Tai Chi practice, um, learn here with my shifu, and Qigong practice. I also am a massage therapist. So if you see an overarching theme is I work with the body and I work with our connection with the body and how it helps us navigate this world that is very much physical and material, but it's also quite expensive, like the body. I don't know if that's a good description. So that's kind of like the practices that I do. And when you ask me about breath and breath work, I was thinking about I was thinking about when did I first hear of breath or like working with the breath. And actually, it's been quite a long time. Like the first time, the first thing I remembered, like I was really going like working with the breath, awareness of the breath. I remember like my mom going like, take deep breaths. I feel like she was the first person who taught me how to breathe, because I struggled a lot with like regulating big emotions, and that was just a constant thing. Take a breath, take a deep breath, breathe with me. Um, so I think that's the earliest the awareness of collaborating with the breath came very from a very young age, and understanding that there is this thing that I can do to regulate myself, but also to connect with other people. Um, and then, for example, when I got into dance very, like I think I was 5 or 6. Dancing, to dance and to sing, you have to understand how your breathing works. So in Mozambique, if you learn traditional dances, you always are going to have to dance and sing at the same time, right? And not only that, but you're gonna have to also like ululate and, encourage other people dancing with you while you are also dancing. And if you don't breathe and if you don't work with your breath, you are not going to survive very long. And it's not going to be a very strong or very audible encouragement. So I think the dancing and singing and the rhythm of it really has been there from a very, very long, like very early, not just with this awareness that, okay, now I'm gonna do breath work, but just the awareness of breathing being this collaboration, this thing that I can work with, that I collaborate with in order to optimize my well-being, but also in order for me to remain present in the world, in order for me to encourage others, connect with others. So I think you're gonna I can go back, and I can tell since I was a little child. um, but it's kind of that's how I understand the breathing. So when I also started yoga, asana practice, and pranayama practice in my teenage years, also through my mom introducing it to me. And then through pranayama, I understand, okay, now there are techniques that you can do. There are things that you can do. With meditation practices, there are also very specific techniques. So, yeah, only when I came to Breathwork-Africa, I had already the embodied understanding of breathing and working with the breathing from like a long, lifelong relationship with that. Um, but it was also a chance to almost like integrate all of it and focus in almost like the thing that connects all my different practices, and everything that I do. So I found that really interesting and a way of focusing in a specific aspect that connects everything. So yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I just love the layers of your story, starting with your relationship with your mom and the fact that she conscientized you to the fact that you were able to do something with your breath to regulate your emotions, and then how it deepened with your movement practices. And then learning specific practices, then another layer with pranayam, and then with Breathwork-Africa, maybe understanding the science and experiencing other practices that um, enabled you to access more expanded states as well. So it feels like it really deepened your experience of yourself and the way that you related to the world.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you find most challenging in relation to how breathwork is often taught in wellness spaces, and how you've experienced how breathwork is shared in group settings, and even with Breathwork-Africa. What did you find challenging?
Well, there's almost like this thread coming from the yogas and the meditations and stuff. There is a thread when it comes to breath work that is very commodified. So what it's in order to make it accessible, we package these practices very simply and nicely so that they can be almost like spread as for and popularized as far as possible. And I've found a lot of difficulties in finding in figuring out how these nice one size fits all practices would work for me. So it's almost like there is a lack of nuance when teaching or when facilitating these practices, and in a sense that I feel like I don't exist in most of the spaces. And it's so tricky because we're speaking about wellness, right? We're speaking about well-being, we're speaking about awareness, we're speaking about connection, we're speaking about health. Um, and these are almost like experiences that everyone needs to feel to be alive, right? And then there is almost like this distancing or just lack of diversity, lack of understanding of different experiences. For example, when I came to Breathwork-Africa, I think I had been introduced to CCB. I was working with CCB. And that for me has been a very challenging technique for me to work through. I learned a lot about myself, but I also learned that I need to figure out ways that work for me. So I am autistic. I am on an autism spectrum, and I also have ADHD. I have some chronic illnesses and mental health struggles and coexisting things that come with being on the spectrum. And when we are facilitating, or when I've been facilitated, and even when I've facilitated before, I find that I am almost like just replicating how I was taught and not really understanding how these practice can work for people like me. How do I make it work for me with my sensory sensitivities, with my most of the time overreactive nervous system, right? Um, and with the social challenges that sometimes I face. So these practices are taught most of the time in this way that sometimes it's not really accessible for me, or they don't quite fit. It's almost like a shoe that doesn't quite fit. So I'm walking around with shoes that actually, you know, so it's been a journey to try and figure out things that actually work, and also to discover what is it about certain techniques that are challenging for me, and how can I work with them because they have value, like in their essence or where they came from, whether it's been from the pranayama practices or from Buddhism practices or Qigong practices. They all come from these very intricate systems, right? They have some truth in them. They carry some power within them, even in this distilled format. So it's finding that power and then making it as accessible and as integrative and inclusive as possible for me. And this has been a journey for me. And then figuring out that also other people struggle with that. So I think that's been one of the biggest challenges. And it's a challenge, but it's also been a big learning curve for me to understand that all these practices need to work for me too. I can make it work for other people when I'm facilitating, but they need to work for me. And by me, I mean myself, but I also mean people like me or who have difficulties similar to me, and even difficulties that I'm not aware of. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think this is so important because, to your point, yes, we do package practices in order to simplify them, in order to share them in a way that it makes it more accessible without quite realizing that every person has a unique nervous system. How do we then share that in a way that holds the awareness of the diversity of how we all experiencing practices and life? And so how do we, before we even go to technique, tap into breath as a way to understand the way that we relate to the world and the way our nervous system responds to certain practices? And then to kind of work with those practices in a way that still supports us without losing the essence of it or the benefit of that particular practice. And I think whether we are on the receiving end of being facilitated or whether we are facilitating, how do we honor what we need? And it feels like this is a journey that you've been on and that you are continuing. What are some of the things that you have learned about yourself, and how are you then also changing the way that you facilitate?
So I've been reflecting a lot about breath work as inherently or essentially or intrinsically integrative. So a lot of times what happens when, for example, you pick up a breath work technique, right? You are almost like extracting it from somewhere and placing it somewhere else, right? And I find that it has happened before. If you look at the wellness industry, the yoga is a big system, and then you take the asana practice, the Zen Buddhism is a massive system that is in the context, and then you take the mindfulness practice, right? And it's similar to breath work in the world. I'm talking generally that breath work are coming from these systems that are inherently integrative. Like you will work with the breath, but the breath is in the body, and this body exists in the world, right? So you can't have, in my understanding now, I've been really grappling with this understanding that breath cannot be exclusive and it cannot be on its own. I don't know how to explain it, but it can't stand alone. So, for example, we acknowledge that the breath connects to our whole nervous system. We acknowledge how much is involved in the breathing physiologically, right? And anatomically, like what makes breathing happen. We can understand that, and we can understand that our body is completely connected. So, how are we facilitating breath work practices in a way that isolates the breath? Like isolates and places only focused on the breath. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it feels like, remember what I said about dancing and singing, right?
Mm.
Even in swimming, like when you swim, you're moving your body, you are in movement in
Yes.
in your body, you're breathing, you're coordinating your breathing with some movement, and you interacting with an environment, right? You're interacting with the water and you're working with the water. So it's inherently integrative, and it's inherently something that connects and creates more and more connections. So what happens when you isolate a practice? I feel like we speak about integration within breathwork, right? You do the breathwork session and then you have an integration. But I think there's something that needs to be even beyond that. If breathwork is integrative, then we cannot just attend to the breath on its own or just an isolation. This is why in the breathwork community, in Breathwork-Africa community, you see psychologists using breathwork in their practice. You see people in corporate using their breathwork there. You see athletes, you see performance artists and whatever. You see doctors, you see everyone incorporating their breathing. And I feel like a lot of times I've heard some people in the facilitation course go like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm winning with this business of breath work because I'm struggling to facilitate that breath work. Meanwhile, these are the same people who have been integrating breath work into everything that they do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that is how it should be. Like that is what is to be encouraged, especially if we are trying to build on connection or integration and this like expanded understanding that these practices belong from to systems, belong to things that are more complex than just that one act of inhaling and exhaling. It is a starting point. It is an accessible point, but it's not it. It's not just it. Yeah.
Exactly. I really love what you're saying because it also speaks to breath being an isolated practice, which in its nature it cannot be.
Mm.
And so we're almost trying to push the practice of breath work into a place that is almost against its very nature. The nature
Mm.
of breath itself is that it's integrative. And I've also, in my own journey of breath and in facilitation and teaching, um, understanding that, yes, the standalone practices or the techniques are actually just more in service of breath as a way of being in the world.
Mm.
That speech is breath, speech is articulated breath.
Yeah.
And that, when we're moving, it's that the breath is responding, and it's this idea of breath intelligence that is always there, that our breath is always supporting whatever activity it is that we're doing, however we're engaging, whether we are listening, whether we are moving, whether we are um, you know whatever it is, whether we are creating, and so I love this reminder of
Mm.
the integrative nature of breath itself.
I find it very interesting that, for example, I was training quite intensively Tai Chi and Qigong um, just before I came after to breath work more specifically. And I've trained Qigong and Tai Chi and did all the things. And I learned it very almost like traditionally from a teacher, right? Like one-on-one kind of interactions. And that's kind of how I've been almost like taught. And in that kind of way, I found myself reflecting on the number of times that breath in itself, like the word breath or breathing, has been mentioned, um, versus the understanding, the in-depth understanding of where breath comes from and how breath operates in the body. And I feel like it is almost a trap. And I'm saying these things as thoughts, right? As provocations. I'm not even like saying right or wrong, but I've been reflecting on it in terms of how in the way that I learned for five years, and I don't remember necessarily this intrinsic focus, breath work. Yet when people spoke about breath work, I had this deep understanding of how it functions and what it can do. So it's almost like we're trying to tap into that. We use breathwork as almost like an access point to understand that deep well underneath, right? Um, and it's almost like we shouldn't stop there almost. It's like I would like to encourage that deep dive rather. So in figuring out how to facilitate and how to understand and transmit breath work from that place of richness, resourcefulness, connection, placement, also like context. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I think there's so much to think about there, Adriana, and um, I think for everybody on this call, I think this conversation is so important because we're taking it beyond just, you know, the technique and the practice. It feels like your experience as someone with neurodiversity has also in some way deepened your exploration of breath. Can you tell us a little bit about how you experienced the world before you were kind of diagnosed before this, and then what the diagnosis supported and how that supported you in relating to yourself differently and supporting yourself differently, and how that also changed the way that you were able to hold your breathing practice?
Okay. So I was officially like formally diagnosed with autism about 4 years ago, 3, 4 years ago. I'm on the spectrum. Before then, I had a range of range of mental health difficulties. A big one was anxiety. But now, knowing that, I know that a lot of what we were calling and everyone else was calling anxiety in me was actually some autistic related things like sensory overload and sensory sensitivities and just emotional regulation and all these things. So I think, wait, let me gather my thoughts. I can't explain how I experience the world because that's the only way that I don't know how different it is because that's all that I know. I just know that it is different because of some assumptions that I made and how things were taught to me or how I perceived others. And then I realized, oh, there was some difference here. There was something that worked for other people and didn't work for me, or that worked very well for me and it didn't work for other people at all. And also some of the difficulties that come also on apparently not everyone are like that. And I
Can you give
discovered
us some more examples, maybe, you know?
um when you have an interaction, okay, when you are in a breathwork session and you are introducing the person and you're looking at the person in front of you and the facilitator is talking to you, there's an expectation of eye contact. And
Mm-hmm.
there's an expectation of stillness as well. Like you have to be still, you have to close your eyes and remain in stillness, right? Um, and then these are moments where I feel very heavily that I am being perceived, because I understand that in order for me to be appearing calm, I need to be still. Meanwhile, if I'm very relaxed and calm, I am not still. I'm a person that's constantly like fidgeting and moving around, I'm constantly moving. But then my expression or my being relaxed did not appear relaxed to other people. So when I start fidgeting, when I start moving, I am perceived like I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I was relaxed, right? So that's one of the things. Like people are, if I'm not making eye contact or if I'm looking down, and I'm thinking deeply, I'm very present with you, but because I am not looking at you and I'm not actually interacting with in that particular format, I am perceived to not be paying attention, not be present, or so it's this understanding of difference for me that I can have a full-on 3 hour conversation or 3 hour social engagement, but then I need 3 weeks to recover from that, right? And I need 2 weeks preparation for that. Apparently, not everyone needs that. And I found that out through life, through people, through trying to do the things and failing miserably and realizing, oh, actually that's not how it works for me. So this is what I mean by difference. And I am an autistic person who can speak, right? I can appear quite people say holistic, non-autistic, right? I can speak to you, I can pretend to look at your eyes, I can mask and fit into those boxes for a certain amount of time, right? But even then, like there are other autistic people who can't do that, can't speak, can't communicate in the ways that I can, can't mask like I can, right? So I'm speaking from my personal experience, and the awareness of a diagnosis gave me also the awareness of how how much diversity even within the spectrum there is, and how many people we don't see in these spaces. We don't interact with them unless you are a professional who specifically works with a neurodivergent community. You have that awareness to a certain degree, but if you're not studying it, researching it, interacting with people on the spectrum, the way that society and the world is built is to not have people like me in mind. So then when I come into these spaces of learning, whether it's university, Breathwork-Africa, or any other interaction where it requires learning, I am hyper aware of not only my challenges and limitations, but also who is not in the room. I'm hyper aware of who is not there, what assumptions are we making. People say, for example, if you're having a panic attack, keep eye contact. Keep eye contact, breathe with me, and people are shouting at you. For autistic person, I am autistic and I have sound sensitivities and I also have panic attacks. If you tell me to look you in the eye while I'm having a panic attack and you're shouting at me, you are pushing me deeper into crisis. But it is common practice. It is done by by what do you call the ambulance people. It is done by emergent ER services. It is common practices. We assume that there is this way of functioning, this way of behaving, this way of appearing and understanding and exploring and experiencing the world. And we run with it, especially if you're not disabled, especially if you're not different in some way to that little mold. And then we just run with it as if it's a formula or a mold that fits for everyone, but we are excluding a lot of people. So I don't know if I answer the question, but that's kind of, yeah.
Wow, this is so valuable for us to understand. And in the health industry, in the wellness industry, and it feels that the very nature of the way that these industries are set up is excluding so many people who actually need it.
And I used to do it as well. That is the danger of it. I, as a person on the spectrum who has qualified as to be an instructor in many of these practices, who has taught many people, I used to replicate inaccessible ways of facilitation, inaccessible
Mm,
ways of teaching and transmitting these powerful tools to people. So it's not just because I'm autistic that I'm not going to replicate these.
mm,
I will, because this is what the society that we've built, these massive systems, these institutions, these learning things, that's how we've been almost like conditioned to
mm,
work. So we
mhm.
almost need to be actively countering it. Otherwise, we're going to slip into the those exclusive ways of working, even if
It,
they don't work for us. Yeah.
yeah, it's so pervasive, isn't it? Uh, like the way we've been raised and educated. It's
Yeah.
so deeply ingrained in our psyche that we unconsciously perpetuate the very
Yeah.
systems that we seek to heal. Adriana, tell us about some of the practices that have worked for you.
Breathwork practices. Um,
Breathwork practices, embodied practices.
I
Um,
find I find when it comes to breathing techniques, I find that this is for me, that combination of breathing with touch or breathing with movement um, are quite effective for me, especially if I have to do a lot of down regulation because I'm hypersensitive to everything. So my nervous system is like this. I look like this most of the time. Inside, this is how I look, like this all the time. Everything is quite, it feels very assaulting all the time. So I have to do practices a lot of the time that are down regulating, down to calm myself down to ground. So in that, if I am in this hyper aroused state, right, hyper responsive, or even just in overload state, just tapping into breathing technique on its own, just trying to find my breath is very difficult. So I find that combining it, again, reintegrating it with movement or with a tactile input is quite powerful. And I can give an example. For example, um, the people who facilitate will have an understanding. So grounding, the grounding breath, the one that you inhale halfway, inhale to full, hold for a little while, and then exhale long through the mouth.
mhm.
That is a very powerful for me. That's quite a powerful tool, like technique for me to use. But when I'm in a state when I'm struggling a little bit, combining that technique with ta touch helps. So I don't know. This will be a good time to try and practice with you.
Yes,
So
please.
if you So just sit comfortably. It's going to be very quick. So basically what we're going to do in terms of breathing is that you're going to inhale halfway. You're going to inhale all the way to the top. You're going to pause for 2 to 3 counts. And then you're going to just exhale and make it long, as long as you want, right? And you're going to do that a couple of times. The only touch that I'm going to add to this technique is your own touch. You can touch, like you can hug if this feels good, or you can hold your hands if this feels better, right? So you're gonna inhale the first time, halfway, inhale all the way to the top, hold for 3, 2, 1, and then let go. And we're gonna do that again. Inhale halfway, inhale to the top, 3, 2, 1, and exhale. Now we're gonna add a little thing. Inhale halfway, inhale to the top, hold for 3, 2, 1. When you exhale, you're gonna just squish, squish, lowering down your arms. And again, inhaling halfway, inhaling to the top, holding 3, 2, 1. Exhale, squish, 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 squish. So this is one of the ways that I found to apply this to me. This makes me feel secure, like makes me feel like I'm grounding myself. I'm here. My body is here. It has, borders, right? It starts and ends here. And this is a lot of the time what I need. I need containment. And not always you have a weighted blanket with you or someone to hold you to do that, right? So you can do it yourself. And this has been quite useful. This has been, it's almost like sending me through touch, sending my brain the message and saying, like, you are here, right? And if you don't like touch, you can press your body against surfaces that feel nice. You can use fabric. I like my own touch. I don't like anyone else touching, but I like my own touch. And it's quite like affirming. I am here. I'm here. This is the boundaries of my body. And I find that a lot of people who struggle with like sensory overload or just get really overwhelmed, this kind of combination with touch is quite effective. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that practice. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any other practices that have helped you, Adriana, when you are feeling overstimulated, when you are feeling like the world is just too much? Are there any other practices you'd like to share with us?
There are quite a few. Um, so and I'm gonna explain the reasoning behind it. So I said I was fidgety, right? I'm constantly fidgeting with something, especially if I'm thinking or focused. And one of the things when I'm very overloaded is that it becomes quite intense, right? And if you have a loved one or you are autistic, you understand that you can be like doing this or pacing up and down. So I particularly find that combining that kind of fidgeting with matching it with your breath, trying to match it with your breath is a good exercise. And I can give you an example. I don't know how this is going to be. I do a lot of this, right? You're gonna see me like walking in the street like this. You're gonna be, I hide this, but I do that all the time. When I am entering like danger zone, right? When things are too loud, I try to match this motion with my breath. So this would be the equivalent of, let's say, coherent breathing, but I first match it. So let's say I have 4 fingers and I always go through the 4, right? So I match it, inhale, 4, exhale, 4, inhale, 4, exhale. But I'm doing too quick, and I can understand once I match my breathing to it, I can understand that I'm doing it too quickly. So I start slowing it down after I match it. And this is almost how I almost signal to myself, slow down. So whether you do this or you do this or you pace up and down, or you spin or you do all these almost like involuntary regulatory movements, trying to match it with your breath to understand where you are at first, like breath awareness, and then doing like a down regulation. That's been quite an interesting and quite useful thing for me to down regulate. Another one would be pearl breathing, tiny. So I have when I reach quite intense sensory overload, I have shutdown episodes. And these have been terrifying before. Now I'm a bit better. They're still quite hectic, but they used to be quite terrifying because I would lose mobility completely for the duration of it. It's almost, I would either freeze into a position or flop like a complete lose, and I would not be able to move. I am not able to move my body. I lose. It almost feels like either for me to move, I require an inhuman amount of energy that I don't have, or that I've forgotten where my body is and how to move. So this is quite terrifying for someone like me who is a mover, right? Body, I like to move, right? To lose the ability to move and not understand why, right? For many years before I was diagnosed, I didn't really understand why that would happen to me. I would just lose and be paralyzed, and I would have to almost bring myself out of it, right? And this is my experience of shutdown. In those moments, in order for me not to panic, I can't reach my fingers because it almost feels like it's too far away from me. Can't reach my toes. I can't reach anything. It feels like my body is, I can't function with it, right? Like I'm doing now. But I can breathe. I can tap into my breath. And sometimes I can't even take deep breaths, right? I can't take deep, expansive breathings. And a lot of times I'm stuck in positions that are not very comfortable. Either something is pressing or it's like my body is very tense. So pole breathing, which is a very gentle, circular, very short breathing cycle, and you just repeat inhale, exhale, like a little pearl, like you have taught us that. That has been quite almost like the thing that has helped me remain sane during those times. It almost helped me to go like, okay, you are still here. You are still in this world. You are still in this body because you can breathe, right? If you couldn't breathe, if you weren't breathing, right, you're not. So through starting trying very hard to connect to this very small space of breathing in me, then I can expand it. The pearl becomes a little bit, and then, and if when my body has rebooted, because I call shutdowns almost like my reboot system, my nervous system goes, I don't know, I don't care about what is happening right now. I can't take in any more information. We're going to just reboot the system. You know, when your computer stops working and no matter how many things you can put in, it's just going to freeze. Um, so that's kind of what my system is doing, and the breathing helps me through it. I can't stop it, but I can almost like remain present with it through it. Um, yeah. So that's the other one that has been very helpful.
Oh, beautiful, Adriana. And the pearl breath is just such a magical little practice. It's so effortless, and yet it just brings such a powerful sense of gentle presence, as you described. And I love the way that you have described how you use it and how it's been supportive to you. I also love your description of how you have worked with breath and your innate ways of moving to self-regulate. And so what seems to be a reflex and the movement rather than suppressing it. And, this is often what we do with emotion as well, is we try and over-regulate it, just working with it and working with the breath with it changes the experience of it, I'm
Yeah.
sure, which I think is so powerful. Adriana, I just have one more question, and then maybe we can just open up to the circle for any questions. As someone coming into a breathing space, a wellness space, whether that's someone with neurodiversity or a physical challenge or any specific experience that requires a different environment from how things are usually set up, what would you say would be helpful for that person to say to the facilitator, a facilitator who might not be aware?
Mm. Before I answer that, I want to say that neurodiversity is the idea that we all have unique nervous systems, right?
Yeah.
And that the diversity in the ways that those the nerves in our brain develops is a normal variation within the human species, right? If you want to.
Absolutely.
So in this room, we are a group of neurodiverse people. This includes um, people who fit the mold, right? The mold that society, the ways, the normative ways of functioning in society that are catered for. But it also includes people like me who are on autistic spectrum and who have other things that make me divergent from the norm. So when we speak about the experience of neurodiversity, we all have that experience of neurodiversity. Not everyone has the experience of being neurodivergent, which is the people who don't fit the mold, the people who are not thought of when school systems are built, when um, doctors and medicine and practices are facilitated. Those people who experience the world in different ways that are not sticking to that specific norm, that understand, behave differently to that norm, that function very different, and have these cognitive experiences that are not very much in that norm. So I identify as neurodivergent But I want to say that we all have variations in our nervous system, and it's important to have the awareness of what is normative, right? What is the norm? What is the thing that everyone caters from, takes for granted, right? As well as the 90% of the rest of the population who is not. I'm saying 90% because mental illnesses, right? Any of the mental illnesses will put you in a neurodivergent
Mm.
placement. Um, if you have a brain injury of some sort, if you have epilepsy, if you have any of the neurodevelopmental conditions, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, like those are divergent ways. If you any of the disorders like schizophrenic, right, that you can hear voices, you can hear other things that other people, those are experiences that normative ways don't cater for. And this is the awareness that we must kind of expand and counter actively, because if you don't counter, we are feeding into it, right? So when I come to a space of facilitation as a neurodivergent person, it is not only my role for me to advocate for myself. um, I might not be comfortable in going like, Ela, I am autistic. We all know how much stigma is around certain conditions, right? And I don't owe you my diagnosis, right? It is useful if I want to really engage and you're not aware. I'm not saying that don't tell anyone,
Mhm.
but I'm saying that this is a collaboration. I'm saying that this is something that needs to be met halfway. It is not just my job as a neurodivergent person, because I have to do that every day. In every space that I go, I already have to do. So it really helps when I go into a breathwork session, the facilitator already has some steps in it. A
And that
step
was my next, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, the steps to meet me where I am. This includes for me, and I'm gonna say very much in my experience, because I can't speak to every neurodivergent person. I don't know every experience, right? But I will speak about the things that are quite helpful for me. The one thing is be aware of lighting. Um, Especially if the lighting is fluorescent lightings. I know that a lot of autistic people like me hate those lightings. Be aware of buzzing sounds, fans, plugs that are very noisy, um, humidifiers. Sometimes we think that having a humidifier with some essential oils is great, but those things buzz, and I can't relax with a buzzing humidifier next to me, no matter how good it smells. The smells are also like creating sensory friendly spaces. And this I'm talking in a group setting, right? When I'm receiving a bunch of people, I want to reduce the variables that could be assaulting. And I'm saying this, but it's actually not this. They are assaulting to nerves, right? So you want to have options. We already do this, like with blankets. You have different kinds of blankets. You have different kinds of pillows. Just expand those options. You have options of not having smells in it, because if the smell can bother one person, if one person is allergic, right? You're already cutting that allergic person out from your room. It's the same thing. Just don't have any strong smells, and then everyone will be able to. Don't have fluorescent lighting. If you're going to switch on or off the lighting, give a heads up. I'm going to switch on the lighting now. Autistic people like me lack predictability, and sometimes we can regulate ourselves if we know that the stimulus is coming. So if you tell me there's a loud sound coming, I'm gonna close this door, but this door makes a sound, I can prep myself to receive that input without it feeling jarring, right? The same goes for lights. So it's that kind of it's active communication, active accommodation. Meet people where they are. Are you comfortably on the floor? Do you need anything? Is there anything that I must be aware of? Invite people in to share what you want them to share. Don't make me come to you. You come to me, asking, what can I do? Right? This is meeting me halfway. For me to go to a breathwork group session is already terrifying as an autistic person. I have to do a lot of prep to go to a space like that. Not only because it's a social interaction with a lot of people, but it's also a lot of stimulus and a lot of vulnerability, right? And I'm managing my nervous system that is already attacked constantly in the world. And now I'm going to put myself in a space where more activation can happen, right? So I already come with very terrifying things. And if you meet me halfway, then I feel like, okay, maybe this can work for me. Maybe I can work with you, right? Have sensory spaces. This is not always possible, but it's very useful, especially when you rent a room somewhere. Look if there's another little room or some other area next to it. It can even be just the garden outside, and make sure that that garden outside is comfortable. And then inform people if you need a sensory break, if you need time out from this environment, there is a sensory room there where you can have a break, you know? And that can be for anyone, not just autistic people. It can be for anyone.
Exactly. And I think what you're speaking to are really general principles that any facilitator should be aware of.
Yeah.
Adriana, what you've shared today is just so practical, so helpful. It has opened our minds. I think all of us, I'm sure on this call, can agree that this has been such a really enriching and supportive conversation. And I mean, I see we've run out of time. I think we could have easily done with another hour. But yeah, we must do this again. I think that we need to have more conversations like this. And I just really appreciate you showing up and saying yes to this. And you have really supported so many people. This is going to go on YouTube, and I'm sure so many more people will have access to this. So I really deeply appreciate you being here. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions, but if people would like to contact you directly, are you open to that? And then, perhaps we can just put your details in the chat box, or if anyone would like to contact Adriana, they can also just get hold of us. Adriana, thank you again, and thank you for everyone who's here and everyone who's listening. And we'll see you next month for our next episode of Threads of Healing, Voices of Breathwork Africa. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.